Welcome to A Journey into Joinery. This will be our final installment where we discuss how to machine mortises. Now, of course, there are other ways and methods, but we hit on most of the primary methods that are used currently today. Now, today what we're going to do is focus on the hollow chisel mortiser and the drill press using mortising bits. Now, this is probably one of the most efficient ways to machine a mortise, one of my personal preferences as well. But we're going to take a look at these two options and why you would choose one over the other. Now, the first thing that we'll do is discuss the dedicated mortiser, the hollow chisel mortiser. And this particular size and model from Delta is probably one of the more popular and common sizes that you'll find in most home shops. Most mortising machines have a variety of adjustments on them. One of them that's very critical, of course, is your fence position setting. That would allow you to line up the bit with the workpiece so that you cut your mortises in the proper location. On this particular model, there's a single-armed lever. Lock it in and you're all set. Now, when you go to install your mortising chisel and bit, they're a two-piece unit. You'll have the drill bit, or the auger, and that goes up inside and gets mounted in a traditional chuck. And then you'll have your chisel, and that gets held in place inside a collar in this area. And you'll see a small set screw right here at the front, and that would clamp on to this portion of the chisel. Now, when you slide these components up in there, you do want to have the drill bit projecting out about a 32nd from the tip of your chisel. Now, one other thing that you'll want to do when installing your chisel that I find is very important, and many people miss this step, bring your bit down while this is still loose, bring your fence forward until it touches. Then rotate your bit, or your chisel rather, until it's nice and parallel with the face of your fence. Then tighten up your set screw. And that will make the mortise that you're machining, the square hole that you're actually drilling, nice and parallel to the faces on the stock. But other than that, there's really not a lot of magic to installing your bit. Up inside, it's just a standard drill chuck up in there, so that's not a real big issue. One of the other adjustments that you'll make, along with setting your fence position forward and backward, is the depth of the mortise, and that's done by this particular control rod. It's held in place with an Allen screw. You bring your bit down on top of your work, set the gap here at the bottom where the rod would bottom out, and then lock in your depth rod. And that will prevent you from drilling your mortise too deep. Again, a very simple adjustment and setup. Now, for those of you that have used a mortiser, one of the annoyances, if you will, is when you go to retract the bit out of the work, it lifts the piece up. That's the purpose of this clamp up here. That clamp is held in place again by a set screw. You loosen it, bring it down on top of your work, perhaps just a little bit above so that you can slide your workpiece back and forth, and then that prevents the workpiece from being lifted up as you retract the bit out of the mortise. Now I'd like to point out a few features that makes a mortiser a superior tool for mortising over a drill press. One of the first things you'll notice right away is this large rack back here. It's a flat gear. Inside here, there's a large gear, and as you pull the handle, that rotates the gear and that drives it along this rack. Notice the size, the mass of both that gear and the rack. It's very, very heavy duty. If you've ever seen an arbor press in a machine shop, the construction of this mortiser is very much like an arbor press, built big, built heavy, and very compact for what it is capable of. Another thing you'll notice right away is this cast iron I-beam type column in the back. Again, that's designed that way for strength and rigidity. Because keep in mind, as you're pulling down on this handle, the drill bit is removing the material from the center of the hole, but that square chisel is being forced into the wood to create that square shape. So as you pull down on that handle, you are exerting a pretty good amount of force to make that cut. Now let's look at the adapter system that converts an ordinary drill press into a mortising machine. And this is a kit that you can purchase. They're actually quite economical for all the hardware that you're getting. It's a real good buy. It'll allow you to hold the chisel the same way as the mortising machine does. The bit goes in your drill chuck, and then you'll have this yoke that kind of clamps around the quill of the drill press. And that allows you to set your chisel and, of course, the drill bit at the proper depth and so forth. This is the hold down clamp, this unusual shaped device here. It adjusts up and down. These two U-shaped bars or rods allow you to hold the workpiece up against your fence, which is actually something the standard mortiser does not have. Back here is a plastic spacer, and it serves as the fence, and then up above is a bracket that kind of holds everything together. There's two wing nuts up here to clamp your fence down to the drill press table. Functionally, it works very much the same way it does with the dedicated mortiser. But let me point out one of the large differences between the two machines. The one thing you'll notice right away, on your drill press, where the quill comes down, there's a gear back here. This is the rack. And then your gear would be inside, directly in line with your hand wheel assembly. Now this rack isn't as beefy or as massive as it is on the mortiser. So it's probably not going to be able to handle quite the stress load that your mortiser can deal with. So that's one drawback. So I really wouldn't want to use this in a production environment continually. It would be a lot of stress on this part of the drill, the quill, over time. Now another thing you'll notice is back here the column looks fairly large and massive, but when you start using this machine as an arbor press type device, you're going to start stressing everything. You're pushing down very hard on the table. You're trying to bend this back and lift this up while you're doing this mortising operation. So you're actually putting a tremendous amount of force on the drill press, more so than if you were just drilling a standard hole. Another thing you'll notice right away is the length of the arms. They're not nearly as long on a drill press as they are on a mortiser. So that means you'll have to pull harder on the handle to cause the drilling operation to occur. Now it may seem that I'm very negative about using a drill press as a mortiser. I'm really not. They actually work quite well. Now one of the advantages of using a drill press as your mortiser, you have control of the spindle speed. With a dedicated mortiser, you're running at a single speed. Here at the drill press, of course, you're only limited by the number of speeds that your drill press is capable of. And as you can see, it's very capable of cutting a mortise. As is the case with most tools, you can buy standard grade and premium grade tools. Now this particular bit here is an old one that I've had in my machine a number of times. It's gotten a lot of use. It served me quite well. This one here is brand new, and it's a premium grade chisel. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to cut a couple of mortises, one with this bit and one with this one, and compare the cuts of both of the mortises. See how much better one is over the other. Now it won't be a true fair comparison because, as I said, this particular bit's been used a number of times here in the shop over the past decade or so. Now when doing mortising, you're most probably going to want to lay out the location on your workpiece where the mortises go. So far in from the face, so far up from the end, and so far long. Now we're going to do two mortises, one with one bit, one with the other, and compare the two. But we'll go through real quickly the procedure to set up the mortising machine. Now I've gone through, loosened up the drill bit, dropped that down, and loosened up the chisel. As you can see, it's spinning freely in there. Now what we'll do first is get our chisel lined up parallel with our fence. So I'm going to bring my fence forward and sight down the back edge of the chisel and get the two to line up so that they're nice and parallel with each other. When I get it to that point, I'll simply lock the Allen wrench. Push my bit in till it bottoms out, and then just bring it down just a little bit, about a 32nd of an inch or so. And I'll tighten up the drill bit. Now generally when I'm machining my mortises, I like to keep my reference face, usually the front face, against the fence. And then I, of course, do my layout line from that point. Now I want the back side of the chisel to be lined up with my layout line. So I simply put the part in, slide the fence forward, and if needed I'll bring my bit down, and by looking at the back edge of the bit and sliding that fence forward, I can line it up very accurately. Now let me show you another trick or technique for setting the distance between your chisel and the fence. Now chances are you've got a nice complete set of drill bits. Now let's say I wanted my chisel to be 17/64 of an inch from the fence to the back side of that chisel. Well, I got a 17/64" drill bit there. I'll put that between the two, slide my fence forward till it bumps up, lock the fence, and now I've got it set perfectly at 17/64 of an inch. Now to set our depth, I'm just going to bring the chisel down on top of the work, and at the back I'm going to measure from the bottom of my stop rod down to the base and set the depth of cut in that area. Now our next step is to bring our clamp down on top of the part so that it won't lift up when we retract the bit. Lock that in, and we're all set to start cutting mortises. Now some woodworkers like to clamp their workpiece against that fence, make their first cut, release the clamp, slide it over, make another cut, and so forth. And I find that my hands are strong enough yet where I can hold the workpiece tight against the fence and do my cutting operations. However, if it makes you feel uncomfortable, feel free to add in a clamp. What you do want to do though is make your two end cuts first. We'll make my left cut, I'll make my full right edge cut, creating the overall length of the mortise, and then I'll make a series of chopping cuts to cut out that middle area. And now we'll try the same mortising operation, same size bit and everything, but this time I'm using the premium bit. Well, here's our sample board, fresh off the table saw. I've sliced it open so we can see inside the two mortises. Now you'll notice right away that the surfaces aren't the smoothest or perfectly finished. In both cases they're flat, but they're a little bit torn up a little bit. This one here was machined with the old chisel. This one was machined with the brand new chisel. Now this material is cedar, and this material is oak. Same thing again, this was the old chisel, this is the new chisel. Both surfaces are relatively flat, but their machine surface is a little bit torn. But nonetheless, it's a pretty good mortise, and I would have no problem using that on a piece of furniture. So that should give you a real good idea of how to work with the dedicated mortiser, the alternative, which is a mortising attachment for your drill press. All around, these are real good machines. Don't expect a machine surface similar to what you would see by using a router to cut out a mortise. That's a different type of machining operation altogether, so you're going to get a different finish in there. But in either case, both machines are adequate and do a very good job of creating those mortises. So this pretty much wraps up what we're going to talk about with regard to machining mortises. Next, we'll move on to the tenons. I'm Chris Dayhut for Woodworking at Home magazine. Thanks for watching.